You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another weekend. It's Dallas week as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 212. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I sit down with NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell to talk about what we saw with the tape after the team's loss on the road to Minnesota. What did we learn from the loss against the Vikings? We'll talk about it right here in Chalk Talk, and then we will preview this weekend's big NFC East matchup, Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. A lot to get into at the top of the show. After that, we will transition to my scouting report, where I will break down what I thought of Dallas Cowboys starting safety Xavier Woods a few years ago, 2017, when he was coming out of Louisiana Tech. He's turned into a nice player there on the back end of that Dallas defense. But first, let's get things started right now in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, joining us here once again on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, my friend Greg Cosell from NFL Films. Greg, welcome to Week 7 of the 2019 season.
Week 7, can you believe it, Fran?
Well, that's what I was hearing. Ben Fennell said earlier. He was like, Week 8. And I was like, Week 8? And he was like, of college football. I was like, it's Week 8 of college football.
I know, it's crazy.
It's wild how quickly.
A couple of good college games, though, this weekend.
Yeah, we'll touch on that in a different podcast,
all right.
I think, this week. But let's get into what we saw from Sunday. The Eagles' loss on the road to Minnesota. Some takeaways, I think, coming out of that game. A tough loss that, you look at some of the stats and you say, okay, well, this is why the Eagles lose the game. 4 turnovers, if you include the turnover on downs, to the Minnesota's 2. You got the penalties. I think it was 7 in favor of 4. You had some of the untimely, just the negative plays, this, shoot yourself in the foot kind of plays, the self-enforced errors, the self-inflicted wounds that that's what causes teams to lose games, especially on the road to good teams. But let's start on offense. And to me, the biggest thing I think, we talked about it last week on the show, is against this Minnesota defense, you do not want to get stuck in third and long. And I think the stats kind of played to that. The Eagles were 4 for 12 overall on third down. They were 0 for 5 on 3rd and 4+.
Yeah, and I think, to me, if you're putting this particular game into somewhat of a larger context, I think it's an offense, particularly without Deshaun Jackson, and hopefully he gets back soon.
Hopefully. So it looks like he's going to be back to kind of practice this week,
right,
and what they're going to work on through conditioning. Doug Peterson talked about it in his Monday press conference. So some reinforcements, hopefully, on the offensive side of the ball.
But I think without him, and what I'm about to say I don't think is a profound scoop, but there's not really any team speed on the offensive side of the ball, particularly at the receiver position. So it becomes an offense that has to make a lot of little plays to sustain offense.
And that's not easy to do.
It's very hard to do in the NFL.
Yep.
And then one misstep, whether it's a run for -2, whether it's a penalty, whether it's one of very few poor throws that Carson Wentz makes, puts you in a really difficult spot. I mean, the game starts with their first series after Minnesota goes down and makes it 7-0 on a drive that took over 7 minutes, which is not a good way to start. But
right.
So you get the ball and you have 3rd and 2. You're coming out with the idea that we're going to really try to run the football. We're not going to be one-dimensional. We want to run the ball. And there's a run through by Kendricks, and
it looked like the mic point was kind of messed up on the zone run there.
And what happened is they moved late.
Yep.
The Vikings moved late with both Kendricks and Anthony Barr.
Yep.
And I think there was just that moment of confusion at the snap, and that's all it takes. And then you get a stop on 3rd down, and all of a sudden it seems like the quarter is gone and you're behind the 8 ball.
Yep.
So the point I'm making is this is an offense that has literally no margin for error.
Yeah.
And it just makes it hard to play that way in the NFL.
Yeah, and I thought that you got to give a lot of credit to Minnesota's front. I thought that they did a really good job against the run in this game. The Eagles really couldn't kind of establish the run.
And they wanted to.
They wanted to.
They wanted to.
And I think when you look at, Doug Peterson was asked about the opening drive in this game, and he said, look, we came out first play, was supposed to be a play-action shot play. They saw that it was too high. He didn't say too high, but going and looking at the film, it was too high pre-snap. Carson checked out of the play. They checked to a run. He had an RPO that ended up being handed off on 2nd down.
Right.
and then third down you had that.
It was third and two.
There was 3rd and 2. So
which you're feeling good about.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Eagles, don't convert there, and they punt the ball away. But I think when you look at the ground game, they couldn't quite get going. I thought that Minnesota did some good things with their condensed looks. They played a lot in terms of like their bare fronts and things like that, just to kind of make things tough on the inside. Linval Joseph, I thought, had his best game of the season.
Well, it's funny you say that because I thought the run game was actually okay if you have a pass game that can hit 18-yard, 22-yard plays. But when your pass game can't do that because you just don't have any speed or explosiveness, then it makes it then the run game's not quite enough.
Yeah. Let's talk about. There's a couple things I think I want to hit on before we get through the rest of the offense. We're talking about the run game, so let's talk about the running backs, and I namely about Miles Sanders. We've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. They continue to find really good ways to get him out in space. We saw the long touchdown on that very popular play, the HB seam play.
Right.
Getting him down the rail was great to see for a touchdown. They ran it again later in the game. And they found different ways to try and get him down the field.
The wheel route from the back, which they seem to run every week, and a lot of teams run it every week.
Yep, they got the post wheel. They had the running back corner route that he ended up not throwing.
Right.
He was going to be open, but pressure kind of forced Wentz off of it. So they're finding different ways to kind of get him down the field. So I want to ask you.
Which is good and bad, because if I'm not mistaken, in the last 5 games, I believe he's had the longest pass reception in each of the last 5 games.
I think there was a stat. I don't want to say. I forget exactly who. I want to say it was either Jeff McClain or Reuben Frank. I'm not sure who. Yesterday said that he's responsible. He's got the 5 longest plays for the Eagles offense in the last 5 weeks or something like this.
Since Deshaun has been out. Yeah, and that's good and bad.
Right.
For obvious reasons.
Sure.
Right.
I think when you look at, but talk about what that can be, and let's just talk big picture. If you have a Miles Sanders who can be that kind of guy for this offense, what can that do? Especially since we see so many of these, they come with him to the boundary side. What does that do from a matchup standpoint?
Well, you always love to have a running back that has some verticality, because now it presents all kinds of problems, and particularly, as you just said, to the boundary side of the formation.
Explain why.
Because in the NFL, what normally happens, even when teams play zone as their core, they will often match up to the boundary. They will lock to the boundary. And what you do there is, if you have a back that can win those matchups, and Alvin Kamara is the best example of that in New Orleans, then it really is advantageous for your offense. Now, the all-go 8-seam touchdown that Carson Wentz threw to Sanders was a really fascinating play, because they also added the jet action with Aguilar across the formation, which made it 4 to the boundary, which is really difficult to defend. And they caught Kendricks, because Kendricks had to run the seam with Sanders, and his eyes went to Aguilar, and he lost a step, and therefore Sanders ran by him.
My favorite part of that was having the closed formation there, the 2 tight ends right on the line of scrimmage.
Correct.
That kind of brought everything up close to the line.
No question.
And really helped to kind of expand everything.
Right. But when you have a back, just getting back to your general point, that can do that, you're often going to get man coverage, and normally you're going to feel pretty good with your back on any linebacker in the league.
Yep. I think ultimately what we're seeing, and again, you're hoping, all right, Deshaun Jackson comes back. If it's this week, if it's next week, whenever it is, Deshaun Jackson comes back into the fold. You have these guys that you can win in these intermediate areas.
Right.
The Dallas Goddards, the Zach Ertzes, the Miles Sanders. You could find those ways to pick defenses apart, find those matchups. If you have that vertical threat that can,
you're hoping those intermediate areas become a little larger.
Exactly.
Because right now the pass game is somewhat limited and condensed, and the defense knows that.
Yeah. Because
there's no one who can really run, by a defense. Now they took 2 deep shots to Aguilar. One of them was down the sideline. One of them was in the middle of the field, and I don't know why he slowed down, because it actually would have been a really good throw if Aguilar, if he didn't slow down, and I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
Maybe he thought he wasn't getting the ball because they had 2 in-breakers on the backside, but Carson Wentz read the post safety sitting low, and if the post safety's sitting low, you're throwing the post.
Yeah, he put it right where you would want the deep post.
Yeah.
One guy that I thought was heavily involved yesterday, I'm pretty sure that this was a career high for targets for Dallas Goddard. A lot of creative ways, some different things they did with him off boot action.
Right.
We saw some screens. We saw some different things they were able to do with him out in the flat.
Yeah, and that's all good.
Yes, exactly.
But it's the same deal.
It goes to what we're talking about.
It's the same deal. Screens, little short throws, all good stuff. But it's all,
yep.
It keeps it pretty low.
Yeah.
And that's a little difficult.
So the one play I would love to be able to break down as well is the fake field goal, because it was very, very
I didn't
much
study
discussed.
it, Fran, so you'll know the details.
Well, all
I can say is, and again, I understand the whole analytics group, and that's all good. But when I was watching the game live, here they were dominating the second quarter offensively. They were moving the ball without a problem at that point.
Yep.
The score, I believe, was 24-10 at the time.
I believe that's correct. Yep.
Okay, so now you're in a position where you kick the field goal. It's 24-13. You're going to get the ball to start the third quarter. As it turned out, they got a touchdown to start the third quarter. You don't know that, but based on the fact that they were moving the ball really effectively, you're thinking, okay, they come out in the third quarter. They make this game 24-20. For all intents and purposes, it's 0-0 at that point.
Right.
And again, I'm sure people will tell me I'm an idiot, but I didn't understand it.
Well,
now, I know that they're going to say that they saw something and they felt that they had the perfect play. And I know you said you researched it, so you can take it from here.
Yeah, so when I heard the explanation after the game, I said, all right, well, when I get in Monday morning, I'm going to go back and I want to see what they saw. So I watched all of Minnesota's field goal block reps just to get a sense, okay, what did they see?
More power to you, Fran.
It actually wasn't that many.
Right.
Their defense is pretty good, so not a lot of field goal attempts against them. Typically what you saw was when Minnesota wanted to block a kick, and there's two ways when you line up on field goal block, it's the same thing with punt return, you are either going to go for the block or you're playing safe in case there's a fake or anything like that. So when they go for a block, they would overload one side with 6 defenders. You'd have your safety, Anthony Harris, line up, and we'll say 5, 6, 7, 8 yards off the ball. At the snap of the ball, he would shift right over the overload side, the side of the block. And on the opposite side of the block, you had your wing, which is where Dallas Goddard's lined up. No one would be over to that side. And the corner that was on that side would just kind of drift upfield as if he was ready in case the ball was blocked, and he would be there
right. He would be the guy to pick it up.
He would be the guy to pick it up.
So they figured they had an opportunity.
Nobody was there to cover him up. So to me, you see that time and time and time again. They also telegraphed in the times that they didn't block, if they were going to play safe, Harrison Smith would be standing up. You kind of get a sense pre-snap. All right, they're not coming on this play. They come out first field goal. What was that 54-yard field goal that Elliott hit? That's exactly the look they got. It was overload coming from Elliott's left side. Dallas Goddard's lined up on the right. The corner on that side, Trey Waynes, he comes soft off the edge. Harris slides the other way. Wide open on the right side.
So that's what they saw to then come back with this.
So that's what they saw and said, okay,
and this time Minnesota didn't do it.
This time they didn't do it.
Right.
I'll be damned if they I don't know if they got tipped, if they just disguised it well, whatever it was, they played it perfectly.
So maybe they baited the Eagles.
They might have. That's a question that they'd have to answer.
Right.
All I know is that I could see what they saw. I get the decision as well because hey, if Goddard, first of all, if Goddard catches that the way that they had played that, he might score, and if not, he's going out of he's going to be coached to go out of bounds. You've got the ball with 20 seconds left inside the 20. You got a couple shots at the end zone to steal a touchdown before the end of half.
I'm not going to dispute any of that.
Yeah, that's so that it was. I thought it was interesting. I put the breakdown up on Twitter for those that are interested in going and just seeing.
I think you're calling a play. The only thing I would say in response to that is you're calling a play based on having someone who doesn't throw the ball throw the ball.
True.
And
I would say the same about maybe the best play in NFL history, arguably.
Oh, the Philly special?
In the same stadium.
Yeah, you could say that too.
But that's the thing is like if from a fan standpoint, like the fans will say, oh, like I don't like the call to be aggressive. Well, I think when you're aggressive, you're going to get some
that's what happens.
That work and
some
that
work,
don't.
some don't.
Exactly. Minnesota, they made a play. All right, let's go to the other side defensively. You know, the Vikings, you mentioned that drive, you know, and they come
The
up
opening drive?
13 plays, 70 yards. If you're going to give up points as a defense,
right,
you want to make them earn it. You want the drive to look that way. Obviously, you don't like 7 minutes going off the clock, but you want to make them
13 plays, 75 yards,
That's
almost 7.5 minutes.
It's like what you just said about
and
the
they
Eagles
hit the third and
offense.
13. That was the critical play.
Right. It's
on the in-breaker to Thielen
one
and
of
dig.
2 third-down conversions on the day for Minnesota.
Well, both the long touchdown drives in the second half, I believe one was 75 yards and one was 88 yards. They did not get to a third down.
You don't like that?
No, that's not good.
That's not good. So
that's a little bit of a problem for your defense.
On the post-game show after the game, I actually named that as my turning point in the game, was that 75-yarder after the Eagles had made it a 4-point game in the third quarter.
Right.
They come down and they stretch it back to 11.
Right.
That was a backbreaker drive.
Yeah.
But after that, you've got that 2-play sequence where
the two Diggs
touchdowns. That was what put you in that early hole. You know,
Correct.
So from everyone talks about start fast. So from an offensive standpoint, defensively they haven't started fast either. And in this game, I think that particularly hurt with those 2 big play drives to Diggs. So let's talk about those 2 plays, and namely the first one, attacking quarters.
The second
coverage.
one we can leave alone. It was a blatant bust.
It was a busted.
It was
coverage.
a blatant bust.
No question. And Jenkins
and we can watch
the game.
Look, you and I can watch that play forever and try to figure out each individual secondary player and what their responsibilities might have been.
Yep.
But the bottom line is it was a bust.
It was a busted coverage. So let's break down that first one.
The first one was a little more interesting.
So it's quarters coverage.
It certainly looks like quarters coverage.
So let's talk through why quarters, what quarters is, the strengths, because every coverage has strengths, every coverage has weaknesses.
Every zone coverage
has strengths, every zone coverage has weaknesses. It's about if you have a play dialed up to attack that weakness. So
let's walk through it very quick. Let's start with the general premise as to why teams play quarters.
Yep.
I would say that the Eagles are not a high percentage quarters defense, but when you play a team that plays with a lot of base personnel, including a fullback, one reason you like to play quarters is because your safeties are closer to the line of scrimmage and actually have run responsibilities first before they have pass responsibilities. So you're getting your 2 safeties involved in the run game against a really good running team that runs out of base personnel.
To put it simply, if you are a one-gap defense especially, so you're asking one player to account for one gap.
Correct.
When you add in a tight end or a fullback,
an extra tight end or a fullback,
that adds gaps. Like if you think about that, imagine a fullback coming through the hole. That A gap isn't just an A gap. You've got 2 gaps there on either side of the fullback that must be accounted for.
Correct. So you want to get your safeties involved as primary run support players.
Yep.
And so that's one reason you would choose to play more quarters, and they had played, and I didn't chart the number, but they had played a meaningful number of snaps of quarters up until that play.
Yep.
Now, on that particular play, let's get more specific now.
Yes.
Let's dig in and go micro.
Yes.
That play, they had 21 personnel on the field.
Yep. So 2 backs, you had a fullback in the game.
And it was straight eye formation.
1st and 10.
Okay.
Looks like a run play.
Looks like a run. The tight end was actually split to the field outside the numbers.
Far right, yep.
Thielen was the slot to the wide side of the field.
Also to the right side, yep.
Diggs was to the left as the boundary X, the single receiver to the short side of the field.
Yep, so you had 3 receivers out wide, you had 2 backs in the backfield.
Okay, now Rodney Mcleod was the quarter safety to the boundary.
So closest to Diggs.
Closest to Diggs, okay? Now, because there was no first level receiver other than Diggs to that side, his pass coverage responsibilities almost became not important.
Yep.
Because what a quarter safety is responsible for normally is if there's a second receiver on the line of scrimmage to his side, inside of the outside receiver.
Yep, so a slot receiver on
a
his
slot
side.
receiver, then the quarter safety is responsible for that receiver who we call number 2 for what we say 2 vertical.
Okay.
There was no 2 vertical here.
Right.
So what happened here is they called a play. It's play action. And Mcleod immediately turned away from Diggs and looked inside.
Yep.
Now, you can teach quarter safeties to play a lot of different ways.
It's all about what the rules are.
It's all about what your rules are. A lot of coaches will say that if you're a quarter safety and there's no number 2 threat at all, that your eyes should turn to number 1.
So instead
Meaning
of looking
Diggs.
inside, his eyes would go outside to
Correct.
Diggs. Okay.
Because in quarters coverage, the way corners are normally taught to play is with outside leverage, meaning that the wide receiver, if he runs to the post, you're going to be playing outside of that receiver. In other words, you're essentially giving up the post.
You're playing to your help.
You're playing
Supposed
theoretical help.
Theoretical help, yes.
Correct.
Yep.
So when Rodney Mcleod turned inside with no interest in Diggs, at that point, Rasul Douglas had absolutely no help.
Yep.
So that's why when we were sitting in our matchup office today watching that play 30 times, we were trying to figure out exactly what Rodney Mcleod was doing. And because we don't know the rules and how he's taught, we're not sure. But yes, it definitely looked like quarters.
Now, so one possibility and one way that teams will do it is that if they're, and it's tough for us to say, especially if they had an idea, okay, this could be play action, you think you might have Thielen coming at you from the opposite side, is that, because again, going back to the rules there, Malcolm was the safety on the other side, the other quarter safety. He's got Thielen right in front of him.
Right, but Thielen ran vertically.
Right, so he attacks Malcolm.
That makes Malcolm responsible for 2 vertical.
Exactly.
He can't give that up.
So when Thielen starts going across the field, in the rules, the more traditional rules that you talked about, he would run with Thielen. He becomes a man player and runs with them, right? And then McLeod,
if McLeod goes to 1.
If McLeod turns to Diggs.
Correct.
But in this case, it almost seemed as if Malcolm, okay, I'm going to allow Thielen to go to McLeod.
Right.
Does Malcolm
And by the
then
way,
have
you can... Yeah, but then it would have been too late.
There's
And
a
by
lot
the way,
going
you
on.
can do just what you said and have McLeod turn inside.
Yep.
That's fine. But then I think, and I've had conversations with NFL coaches about how you play quarters, then I think you have to have your outside corner play with what would be viewed as more man technique.
Right.
You can't give up the post because you're not going to get any help over the top at that point.
Yep.
So again, there's
tough.
no blame being played. We're just discussing quarters coverage.
Yes, and and Minnesota called up a great play. They saw plenty of quarters in the first 2 drives. They called up a play to beat quarters, and they beat quarters. I mean, that's football. That's coaching. It was well executed.
It sure was.
Interesting. All right. Well, that's. I was glad we usually don't get into that deep into a play.
No, but again, because
hopefully you're able to follow at home.
Because we spent in the office, as I said, watching the play 30 times.
Yep.
You know, when I got to that play, I called, because in our matchup room we have former coaches. Who work on the matchup show with me. I called all these guys in, and it's okay. Let's talk about this. And we went through it over and over and over, at times thinking maybe it wasn't quarters. And then we were trying to figure out what it might have been other than quarters. I think we did come to the conclusion that it was. But again, without knowing how it's taught, we don't know exactly what was supposed to happen.
Sure.
Although there's no quarters coverage that says just let a guy run to the post free.
Right.
So something was not right.
And it is very common to see a lot of big plays around the NFL get given up at quarters, because quarters it's a tough coverage play because of all the rules that go along with it. But as we mentioned, it's very common around the league, because if you're a one gap team, which most
and you're
teams
trying to defend the run,
that's why it's so prevalent against these teams that come from the Mike Shanahan tree.
And by the way, there's more teams playing with a fullback now in the NFL.
Yeah, because I mean we're starting to get back to the cyclic part of football. We're starting to see a little bit more base personnel as teams go smaller on defense, we get bigger on offense, and around we go. Stephon Diggs, 7 for 167 and 3 touchdowns on the day.
And some drops.
And some drops. That's a very good point. Yeah, a couple of tough ones along the sideline. All right, let's talk about the run game, because the Eagles, you come into this game, we talked about it. Minnesota,
the Eagles can stop the run game.
They held Dalvin Cook to 2.6 yards per carry. His long of 14 came with 10 men on the field.
I noticed that. It's funny. And this gets to another larger point. The Eagles can stop the run, no question. So now you get into the larger issue. What is the NFL game about now? Yeah. And again, there's no hard and fast rule here.
Right.
This is not a mathematical equation, but I think a lot of people would say, particularly newer breed, maybe the older coaches who've been in the NFL for a long time wouldn't say this, but I think there's a sense now that the game is about creating explosive plays on offense and stopping explosive plays on defense.
Yep.
If you're just giving sort of the Cliff Notes version of where the game is.
Yep.
And stopping the run game is nice. But if you can't stop explosive plays in the pass game, you're going to have a tough time. And pass rush is nice too. But I think a lot of teams can work around that now with the kinds of plays that they call offensively.
Yeah. And I think that Minnesota did. I mean, we saw all the stuff we talked about. Screens, they hit a few really good screens. Draw plays, especially second half, they had a couple of really nice draws, Minnesota. Boot action. We saw a lot of the things we talked about.
Pass rush becomes really important, obviously, when it's, let's say, 3rd and long.
Yep.
So then it depends on how many 3rd and longs you can get your opponent in. And obviously, we know in this game, the Eagles didn't get Minnesota into, were they in any 3rd and longs? Maybe one.
I don't know. I know they finished 2 for 10 on 3rd down.
Right.
I don't know how many 3rd and longs
maybe there were more than I'm saying. But the point is if you're going to give up big plays in the pass game and it's not on 3rd down, then play calling can take care of pass rush. Then it becomes coverage in the secondary. And I don't think we're saying anything unfair by suggesting that that's an area that the Eagles have struggled this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, the big plays, it kind of goes again. I think that if you talk with and you listen to Jim Schwartz talk at press conferences, I mean, he does not want to give up the big play.
No one does.
Well, of course, no one does.
No one does.
In theory, the defense, if you're playing cover 3, and the Eagles play a ton of cover 3, that's to take away the big play.
Right.
And
because in cover 3, your corners rarely are in press. They can be at times.
Right.
Like sometimes to the boundary, your corner will be in press.
Yep.
But I mean, look, we understand what this defense is theoretically built on. It's theoretically built on 4-man pass rush pressure and 7 men in coverage.
Yep.
And 7 men in coverage, particularly when you're playing a zone concept, is designed to prevent the big play, Fran. It's a numbers game.
Yep.
You're playing with 7 in coverage.
Yep.
There's only 5 eligible receivers.
Right.
So 7 in zone coverage is meant to take away the big plays in the pass game.
Yeah. Well, Jalen Mills looks like he could potentially come.
Right.
Or he is. Doug Peterson talked about it at his press conference today. Is going to come back to practice this week. We don't know if he's going to be able to play Sunday against Dallas, but up in the air. Ronald Darby coming off the injury, coming back to practice this week. So we'll see. We talked about the possibility of Deshaun Jackson. The Eagles may be able to get some reinforcements in the secondary this week, which would be big. I mean, having those guys back, I think it would be really, really big for this defense. That's the
area they need to improve significantly.
I might be breaking news to you.
About the cut?
Yeah.
You're not.
Oh, there you go. Would you check Twitter before you walked in the building?
No, it was a brain meld.
Well, the Eagles did release Zach Brown. Yeah,
because Grugier Hill's now healthy, and he essentially. We really liked what we saw from him at the end of last year. So did the Eagles.
And he had Greg. He looked great in camp before the injury.
And he'll fill that spot.
Yeah, so
they feel really good about him playing that role.
I'll tell you what, too. T.J. Edwards played 10 snaps in the back end of the game. I don't know if you got into the 4th quarter and so.
I did not see the final 10 snaps of the game.
I'll tell you what. He looked. And again, garbage time. T.J. Edwards looked pretty good.
No question. But I mean, I think the Zach Brown cut's a function of Grugier Hill.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you feel like you want to hit on?
I think we need to move ahead because I think Sunday night's a pretty important game.
It is a pretty big one for first place in the NFC East, and I've got a lot of things I want to hit on you here with the Dallas Cowboys, Greg. So, kind of a new look offensively there in Dallas. With Kellen Moore, and they're doing a little bit different. They start 3-0. And everybody's saying, "Oh, Kellen Moore, he's going to be a head coach next year." And then they go 0-3, and now the world's burning down in Big D.
Well, so now maybe he'll only be the offensive coordinator on Robert Saleh's staff.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I want to run some things by you.
Who, by the way, I like a lot, but that's not the point.
I mean, that defense is playing lights out. So I asked Ben Fennell. It was like late in the afternoon today. I turned to Ben, and Ben does a great job with everything that we do for the podcast and for everything we do from a content standpoint, X and O's wise. But I said, look. The Cowboys start 1-3. They finished 0-3 in the last 3 weeks. So let me ask you, what's the difference? Go through the stats. Let me look what are the big things here, because I want to see what the trends are. Because I think I follow a good amount of Dallas people on Twitter, and and you get Jason Garrett, he's got his mitts back on the offense. It's more him now than it was Kellen Moore. It was Kellen Moore.
We don't know any of this.
Well, no, of course
we don't know any of this at all.
So he pulled some interesting numbers. The red zone, they start with 5 touchdowns, no picks first 3 weeks. No touchdowns, 2 for 9 passing in the red zone the last 3. First down rushing has dropped from 4.15 yards per carry down to under 3.7 yards per carry. Third down passing has been worse. Third down overall.
So I think you kind of hit on it.
I mean, some of the key situations, they've gone worse. Play action has dropped considerably. They had 39 play action passes in weeks 1 to 3, and his numbers were crazy good. Over 81% completion, 4 touchdowns. 22 play action plays the last 3 weeks, no touchdowns, 2 picks. So I think overall, and again, the big thing is like, all right, well, look, you and I know this. The numbers can tell you any story you want. The one thing that I think is interesting is this. The first 3 weeks, Dak Prescott was under pressure 21 times. Last 3, 56 plays where Pro Football Focus said he was under pressure.
Right.
So I think when you look at that and you say, okay, that could be a big, and you have injuries to the offensive line, and that certainly have impacted that. But pressure seems to have impacted this offense.
And there's no question, because I think that, since he got in the league, Dak Prescott has essentially played for the most part in pristine, clean pockets for the most part, because there's a really good offensive line.
Yeah.
And I think Dak Prescott is a quarterback that when he's comfortable, and you can say this about a lot of quarterbacks, obviously, but I think when he's comfortable, he throws the ball very, very well. I think when he's not as comfortable and there's people around him, I think he speeds up his delivery, plays a little faster, and his accuracy just drops a bit. He's not scattershot. He's not one of those guys that throws it, 10 feet up in the air above a receiver, but you're getting into the precise ball placement element of quarterbacking. And, I think that some had a concern with that when he came out of Mississippi State. And obviously playing in clean pockets, you're comfortable. I mean, I can remember him hitting Devin Smith, who was inactive this week, for a long touchdown against the Redskins, a beautiful play action play, really nice route concept, and those kinds of throws. And that was a deep drop and a deep throw. And I don't think there was a defensive lineman within 7 or 8 yards of him.
Yep.
And he's had a lot of that throughout his career, and he's been a comfortable player. And for the most part, he's been a good quarterback. As in anything now, it comes down to pressure. Now I think it'll be incumbent upon the Cowboys in this game as to how they choose to play offensively.
Sure.
Because it's still, I think, an Ezekiel Elliott-based offense. And I don't know if they'll look at this game and say, hey, let's go back to basics, or if they'll look at this game and say, hey, the Eagles stop the run really well. They don't defend the pass particularly well. Let's come out and be aggressive right from the start and see if we can get up 14-3 and change the whole feel of the game.
They've been a big play offense this year. I mean, they're tied for second right now in 20-plus touchdowns with 6. They've got 26 completions of 20-plus. That's tied for third in the league.
They've been a big play offense. Yeah. And Amari Cooper, and I guess, we're talking on Monday night.
I believe Chris Mortensen said today on ESPN late, or before we started recording, that he was iffy. That's unofficial.
Mort's pretty tight with that group. So iffy is, does not sound positive.
Yeah.
So even if he's in uniform, maybe he's playing 10 snaps.
Yeah. Right.
So, and I remember a few weeks ago, Sammy Watkins, tried to give it a go with a hamstring injury, and he played 2 snaps and he was done for the day.
Yeah, it's a quad with
it's a quad.
Yeah, right.
So, assuming he doesn't play. Look, the 3 receivers they went with in this game obviously were Gallup, Wilson, and who am I missing is the third wide receiver that they played with on Sunday?
Give me a second. It was Devin Smith was inactive. Cobb has been banged up. Tavon Austin,
correct.
Austin.
So those were the 3 in their 11 personnel package.
Yeah. So I think, real quick, schematically, because I think that's kind of the big, especially if if there's no Amari Cooper, you have to go back. All right, well, what are they doing schematically that's a little bit different than what we've seen in years past?
And that's a hard question, and I'm being honest with you, because I think the play action stuff, I'll tell you what, I thought coming out this season, because I went through Dak Prescott's, a ton of his throws last year. I started week 10, which I think was the first game against the Eagles last year.
Got it.
And watched everyone.
So post Amari Cooper trade.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I started.
Got it.
And what struck me about their offense was how they were not very good or that frequent with play action given their run game.
Right.
So my guess is when Kellen Moore came in this year, and he said, you know what? We've got a great running back. We've got a quarterback who's good with play action. We've got a good two really good wideouts.
Yep.
We need to be a really good play-action team.
Yep.
And they started the year like that.
Yeah, and what I think one other thing I've noticed about them too this year is that, to me, as this was especially pre-Amari Cooper last year, they were a very much an isolation route-based offense.
Without question.
I think we're playing more conceptually this year.
Yes.
And I think you're seeing a little bit more 2- and 3-man route concepts.
Yes.
I think you're seeing more stacks and bunches from that group, more shifting and
very smart.
So I think that they're making things very well defined for Dak.
Yes.
And some of these plays, the one that you're breaking down this week on the Eagles game plan, I mean, it's picture perfect. Like that's how you want it to look.
Right.
They were playing very, very good offensive football, and the numbers speak for themselves. Even though that the numbers, I read off the numbers that dropped off. This is still a team that's moving the football through the air, even when in these 3 losses. They're still putting up.
I mean,
yards and
obviously,
bunches.
he was going to put up numbers versus Green Bay because he had to throw so much, but Dak made some great throws in the second half, no question. And he's capable of that. And you have to be careful with that because he certainly can do that. And the other factor with him is he does have the movement ability.
And they do a pretty good job with the QB run game and moving the pocket. I mean, they do some good things there.
Right. But like I said, I still think that it starts. Look, even this past week, obviously they got behind and had to throw, and they ran a ton of plays, but Zeke still had 28 carries.
Yep.
They want to run the ball.
They want to run the ball. 2 other big, you talk about Amari Cooper, they were missing both starting tackles this week. Tyron Smith has been out the last couple of weeks. Cameron Fleming has stepped in at left tackle. Cameron Irving's over in Kansas City. Cam Fleming, who has struggled.
Yeah,
so let's put it,
I think Brandon Knight at right tackle, though, has actually done a pretty good job.
You've watched him at college.
I watched him in college.
Yeah,
I even brought my notes.
Yeah, give us the notes here on Brandon Knight.
It's funny because
is he a rookie?
He's a rookie from Indiana. He's shorter than desired to play in the outside, although he did play right tackle. He was a 3-year starter at Indiana, so he had 26 starts in the Big Ten. Okay. That's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Now, I thought that he was pretty athletic, and I thought he was consistently sound in his fundamentals, which you kind of see on tape, even in the NFL, in his start and maybe a little more than a half, because Collins got hurt last week. I thought because of his height, he'd probably be better suited to play guard, but he was a 3-year starter at tackle, and that he's playing right tackle, which is where he played at Indiana, and I think he's held his own. I don't think he's been a liability at right tackle.
The anchor strength.
The anchor strength. I made a note of that.
Yeah.
That's where I thought he'd have a problem, and I thought he had some issues this past week against the Jets with his anchor and speed to power rushes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's what stood out to me on film watching is that he's struggled a little bit in terms of being able to hold his own at the point of attack, whether it's bull rushes or even in the run game trying to generate movement, but can get out in space. That athleticism you speak to.
He can do that.
Definitely shows up. All right, one other guy on offense I want to ask you about. You mentioned him, Michael Gallup. He's turned into a better player than I thought he would be coming out of Colorado State.
Yeah, and I think I liked him more than you did. I went back and looked at my notes. I didn't bring my notes on him because we've talked about him before, but I remember making a note when I finished watching his tape that I thought he had the potential to be a 1 or a 1A wide receiver in this league.
Yep.
And I think that's turning out right now.
Yeah.
And I think that he can get on top of corners. He's not a burner in a strict sense, but he can get on top of corners. And I think he's really good on in-breaking routes. He works the middle of the field well. He's a big body. I think he's a really solid NFL wide receiver.
Yeah, it's look, if this offense is firing all cylinders, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous group. Not having Amari Cooper would be big. Not having either of those tackles would be big. So we'll see how much health kind of plays into this game.
What's interesting too, and I don't know, maybe this is a controversial point of view. Obviously, Jason Witten's back.
Yeah.
And I know they got off to the great start in the first 3 games, but in some ways, I think Witten being back has also had a little bit of a negative impact because I don't know your feeling, but I like Blake Jarwin, and I think he's pretty athletic.
He's made some nice plays down the seam.
Yes, and I think they lose that with Witten. Now, they're still lining him up as the boundary exit times, and again, we can debate that. They obviously feel he can do that. They tried to hit him on some vertical shots this week. He was pretty well covered.
Yep.
One by Blake Cashman.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I'm just going by what I see on tape, Fran.
Sure.
I think that Blake Jarwin gave them some verticality from the tight end position, and I guess it's hard to sit Jason Witten down because he's Jason Witten.
Right.
But somewhere along the line, I think they might lose a little something.
Yeah, and you mentioned too the run game. I think that going up against a tough Jets front that we saw last week, they struggle to run the ball. I think they struggle to get things going consistently in this game, and that was part of the reason.
But one
they
thing
got
I
in the
thought, and you probably thought the same thing before we just move on to their defense real quick, is the Jets and the Eagles don't play alike at all on defense.
No.
And
No,
I
they
think
don't.
you have to be careful about making a direct comparison. The Jets
that's
are
fair.
incredibly multiple with their fronts, a lot of pressures, both run and blitz, pass blitz, and the Eagles don't play that way.
Right.
Greg Williams is a lunatic in a good way as a defensive coach, and the Eagles don't quite play that way. So it's a different animal this week.
Sure. All right, well, let's go over to the Dallas defense, and I want to ask you this question to start things off. What do you feel is the strength, the biggest challenge for the Eagles going into this game? What's the strength of that Cowboys defense?
Well, I would have said prior to this year, or in the early part of the year, that I thought they had a really good defensive front. But it hasn't been as good from a pass rush perspective. I think their linebacking core is really good. It's probably been a little up and down this year, but I think if they're playing well, they're really good. Although what really struck me this week and a little bit the week before is a lot of rotation there, which
they are playing a very strange rotation.
Yes. Which again, neither you nor I can figure out the reason for it, other than the fact that
so here's my best.
Sean Lee's
stab
playing
at it.
a lot of in nickel. Thomas is playing a ton of nickel.
He's playing. So it looks like what they do is Joe Thomas, former Green Bay Packer, comes on, definitely sub-package player.
That's all he is, really.
When they come in their 3-3-5 or their 3-2-6, so they're in, we'll say a lighter nickel or with their dime. He seems to be a backer that will then come on and play.
Correct.
Jaylon Smith likes to go up. They like to put him up on the line of scrimmage.
Which is something I think is a little new this year.
Yes, exactly.
Because here's what a lot of teams now do in the league, and the Cowboys are now doing it. They line up 3 defensive linemen to one side of the center.
Yeah, tilted front. Yeah,
tilted
heavy front. Yep.
Okay. They put a linebacker as a stand-up 3 technique opposite the tilted front.
Yep.
And a wide 9.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say every team, but I can't tell you watching tape how many teams now do that.
Yep.
And that linebacker now, who's basically a stand-up 3 technique on the ball, he'll rush, he'll be part of stunts. Because when you line up 3 defensive linemen in the tilted front to one side of the center, I'd say over 90% of the time you're getting some form of a stunt.
Yes, and they are very active with their stunts and twists up front when they line up. Even if they don't put a linebacker on the into the B gap on the opposite side of the tilted front, if it's just 3 on one side and 1 wide 9 defensive end, and those are the only 4 guys, you can expect some kind of sometimes like some really long, wide stunts.
The long sticks, as we like to say.
They have some.
Well,
long
if you do it with Smith,
stunts.
I mean, you're dealing with a guy that's got some speed.
Yes, and he got a sack against the Saints off a play that was just like that.
I remember it very well.
Oh, good, because you're breaking it down on Eagles game plan.
Oh, okay. Well, we just did it. I'm done.
I think when you look at this front, though, I mean, look, I know the production against the Eagles has not been good, and the production this year hasn't necessarily been great. DeMarcus Lawrence is a very good pass rusher.
Yeah,
overall.
and Robert Quinn can still bend that edge. And
he's very physically gifted. I mean,
I would say he's not a guy with a wide variety of moves.
Right, exactly.
But there's 2 things he can do really well. He can bend the edge and beat you off the edge.
He wins with his feet very well.
And he's really good as a looper in stunts.
Right.
Those are the 2 things he does really, really well.
Yeah, I think to me, like when we watch college pass rushers and they say, this guy, he's a one-trick guy. He can run the hoop. He's like the guy you point to and say, yeah, see, like this works in the NFL.
And again, you may know this better than I, and I don't know, maybe it's not known yet, but Jason Peters.
Right. And
because Andre Dillard, look, you and I both love Andre Dillard. There's no question when you watch him, you see the really good feet, but he's also a rookie.
Yeah, and I think what were your takeaways watching him? Because, look, obviously a tough matchup against Everson Griffin, who's playing really, really well for Minnesota. Watching him, he had some really good reps. He had the biggest thing that I thought watching him against Griffin, there were some times where, and actually he did get matched up on Danielle Hunter as well at sometimes. They moved him over and they brought Weatherly in. But the anchor strength, mainly when he got caught playing with a tight base a couple of times, where his feet were close together.
Both against Griffin, and he gave up the sack to Hunter, where he played with a tight base. And no, he struggles at this point in his career, which is to be expected because you're not seeing a lot of this at Washington State in the Pac-12. You're not seeing a whole lot of speed to power by really good pass rushers.
Right. Yep.
So this is something that you can practice, and the Eagles' offensive line coach is as good as there is in the NFL. And you can practice that all day long.
Yep.
But until you face it in a game with someone playing at the level of Everson Griffin, who's actually playing at a really high level this year, and Danielle Hunter, it's just not the same thing.
Sure. No, it's to me, watching it, I said, you know what? Like I was pretty impressed. Why I should have put something out in my article this week on Dillard.
You see the smooth footwork, the athleticism, but again, now he'll face Robert Quinn, assuming he plays. And it'll be a little different animal.
The one play that stands out was there was a spin move, from Everson Griffin, he's one of the best spin moves in the NFL.
Oh, terrific.
He unlocked his hips and played it inside perfect. I mean, it was really,
well,
really
no.
well
He's got movement ability, which is why you drafted him.
Just other guys. We're just going to throw out some names from this Dallas defensive front. Anything that stands out, let me know.
Well, I like Malik Collins a lot.
Yeah, you've always liked Malik Collins. Coming out of Nebraska,
yeah, I did.
Him.
I think
Tyrone Crawford, Kerry Hyder playing up and down the line for them. The former Detroit Lion. Dorrance Armstrong is showing up.
He's getting some good snaps, by the way.
Tristan Hill, the
Kansas,
rookie
right?
from UCF.
Dorrance Armstrong
From Kansas 2 years ago. Tristan Hill, the rookie.
Dorrance Armstrong was a
pick.
guy that I always liked. I thought his production didn't match his athleticism in college, but I thought he was a good prospect because he had a skill set that I thought was translatable to the league.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tyrone Crawford's still there as well.
Yeah.
A guy that plays up and down the line as well. So it's a good group. They rotate players in and out. Rod Marinelli, he likes his guys to play a certain way, and they get after it. It's a talented group that comes at you in a lot of different ways.
And one area, one
great.
area again that the Eagles will look at in this game is to attack Van Der Esch, the linebacker, in coverage because he predominantly matches up to the back.
I mean, that's
an area they'll look to attack.
Yeah, it'll be that's certainly something to look at. They've done it each of the last 5 weeks. There's no reason to think they won't try it again this week. Let's talk about that secondary.
And it could be banged up.
Could be banged up.
Anthony Brown, their slot corner, left with a hamstring.
Yep.
Byron Jones, their best corner, left with a hamstring.
Yep.
We don't know the severity, but hamstrings are normally not a 2 or 3 day issue.
No.
If both those guys can't go, and again, we're speaking on Monday night.
Sure.
That presents a lot of problems because you have to remember what happened Week 14 last year, Fran. Week 14 last year, they played a ton of dime, and they matched Jones on Ertz on third down.
Right, yep. And that was the big matchup early in his career when Jones was a safety.
Right. So if Jones can't go, or even if Brown can't go, I guess
Jeff Heath.
Well, no, I mean, they could go with Goodwin, who played this week, who's been in the league for a number of years, started with Atlanta. He's a tall, long corner. Could he conceivably match up to Ertz and they can go, who knows? But you lose 2 corners, you start to get into a little bit of an issue.
So Darian Thompson, a former third-round pick of the Giants, has been playing a little bit on defense. It seems like he's kind of been rotated in there a little bit.
Yeah, but he's a safety.
Right, I'm just talking in terms of being a tight end matchup. If there was a player that they would.
I noticed they've had a few more snaps in the last couple of weeks with Woods matching up to the tight end as well.
And I like Woods. We're going to talk about him later in the show.
Yeah.
But he's a smaller body.
Yeah, but he's a better athlete than Heath.
No, I mean no question. Yeah, I mean that's
yes.
That's
saying what the film shows.
Right, exactly right. Xavier Woods is a good player.
Yeah.
Chidobe Awuzie starting at left corner for them. Most of his reps on the left side. Jordan Lewis starting to get. He
played this week when Brown came out, and he was their dime player before he became their nickel player.
Right. It'll be interesting to see how, depending on how the injury situation plays out this week, how the Eagles try and attack some of these matchups. Because they say, hey, if they want to play more in base, do we try and go lighter and say, all right, we're going to try and make you play in sub? It's going to be interesting to see how they decide to play that.
Yeah, or if they're down corners, do the Eagles say this week, let's play with 11 personnel?
That's what I mean. Yeah, we're going to play light.
And let's make you go deep into your corner group and play with guys you ideally don't want to play with.
Right. Not a heavy blitz team. We talked about the stunts and twists. I'm just kind of going through my notes here.
That's the way they normally generate their pressure.
Coverage-wise, what do you typically see from them?
I think they play a lot more man than people probably think.
Much more than.
And I think that's a function of Chris Richard, who's kind of taken over the defense.
Right, sure.
So they're an aggressive man defense.
So I looked back last year, 12 pro. We talked about the matchup to tight ends. Last year, this year, they've matched up primarily to 12 personnel with base, except for the blowout win against Miami where they went with nickel. In games against us last year, they saw 41 reps of 12 personnel with Ertz and Goddard. 61 Okay, 61% of the snaps were in base. So we'll see how they decide to
Well, like I said, I know on third down last year in the Week 14 game, they played dime and they matched Jones on Ertz. And by the way, if they had all their people, that would make sense. Because I don't think there's anyone on the perimeter, and I'm just being honest based on film study, that they would feel that, oh my God, that guy's a really difficult matchup for us.
And we remember what Dallas Goddard did against this team last year in that game down there.
Right.
He had the big game that could have had that long touchdown that got taken off the board to the questionable penalty, and had another touchdown in the game as well. It's going to be a fun matchup. A big one. Very important one.
It's kind of an important game.
Important game in October here down in Jerry World.
Well, it's an important game because the Eagles, it's the second of 3 road games, and people can look ahead to, no one's looking ahead, but you can say that Buffalo is next, and the immediate thought of Buffalo is, oh, they're a bad team, but they're not a bad team.
They're not a bad team. They're playing really good defense right now.
So, I mean, it's not a case of, oh, if we lose this one, we just go beat Buffalo. You can't think like that.
No.
It's too early for the dreaded must win, but this is an important game.
By the way, they're saying that right now in Dallas. Dallas does not want to lose 4 straight either.
No.
They don't want that. So, Greg, we'll be here next week at this time. I'll be probably a little bit tired.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. It'll be a long night Sunday night, but hoping for an Eagles win. We'll break it down here next week on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Great stuff from Greg, and you can follow him just like I do on Twitter, at Greg Cosell, and while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com, and you know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show, but the best way, the number one way, is go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you listen, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. You can leave us a question. I wanted to get to a couple of people that left ratings and left questions. Just give them a quick shout out. Zakenzi left a 5-star review saying how much they appreciate the analysis on the show each and every week. And then Vivek 000 left a 5-star review and appreciated that it's not just a sports guy shtick on the show. We offer good analysis. Really appreciate both of you for leaving those 5-star reviews and the comments. And again, if you want a question answered here on the show, if you want a big picture question about the game or something specific to the Eagles when it comes to a certain matchup or where they've done so far this season, make sure you just go leave that question on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, wherever you listen. We will get to it here on the show. All right, let's get to the next phase here. Let's get into my scouting report on former Louisiana Tech safety Xavier Woods, now the starter for the Dallas Cowboys.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the scouting report.
All right, so Xavier Woods, he came out in 2017. So we're talking now, he's been in the league for about 3 years. And this is a player that I really liked coming out of Louisiana Tech. And we're going to get into my notes now. He was a 4-year starter, started 49 games at Conference USA, 3-time first-team all-conference down there for La Tech. Lined up at both safety spots, depending on the team. He lined up at left safety or right safety, was used interchangeably, lined up all over the field, spent time down in the slot in their sub-package. So you liked the position versatility. But overall, an undersized safety. So kind of a spark plug player, liked the versatility, had a slight frame with short arms. So you worried about the size a little bit from that standpoint. But a lot of positives, and this kid was a smooth athlete, moves really well, still does. A good athlete for the safety spot, explosive enough to cover a lot of ground in the middle of the field, and he is basically their free safety. Spends a lot of time in the post there for the Cowboys defense. Very light on his feet, looked the part in moving in reverse, is able to drive on throws in front of him with ease, and displayed quality reaction quickness, had a feel for playing in man coverage. I thought his instincts there were pretty good, showed the ability to mirror and match and follow, stay in a receiver's hip pocket at the top of routes. I was really impressed with his ability to jump throws in man coverage and just always be where he needed to be. Despite his size, I thought he looked comfortable and confident playing near the line of scrimmage in the run game. He did a good job working through traffic and finding his way to the football. He would be able to come to balance from distance and finish a tackle one-on-one in the alley. Was really consistent in taking good angles to the football. Really good tackler, very technically sound. Despite his size, he had the athleticism to just just go in and consistently finish, get his man to the ground when he was one-on-one with them out in space. Aggressive blitzer as well. He hit it with good timing, good speed, showed the ability to make plays both inside and from the slot as a blitzer. So really good versatility there as well. And a high motor kid, was always playing 100 miles an hour. You could tell he was one of the emotional leaders of that team, just with his play personality, was really, really endearing. Now, from a negative standpoint, I mentioned the size. I thought that could potentially be an issue for him. I wanted to see him get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. How much weight could he put on and still maintain that athleticism? That was a question I had. And he didn't always look as fast as he timed. He timed very well at his workouts in the pre-draft process. I didn't think he didn't always test quite to that speed, but this was a guy that overall, was typically where he needed to be. He did get fooled at times by quarterbacks' eyes, but this guy was really reliable playing on the back end. And I wrote as just my final summary, I think he's an NFL starter, and other than his lack of size and elite play speed, he does not have many major flaws as a prospect, whether it's as a box player or as a space player. I think he translates really well to the league. He's got a high floor to be a do-everything backup and a core special teams ace. I really, really liked his floor there, but I think that he could be an NFL starter. Fits best as a sub-package safety early on as a rookie, and then as a starter by year 2. He happened to follow that exact path with the Cowboys. Was a backup early in his career. They had Byron Jones there at free safety. Once he kind of established himself by year 2, Jones was able to move over to corner. He stepped in at free safety next to Jeff Heath, and he has not looked back. He's battled some injuries so far this year, but this kid has turned into a really nice player for them. Very reliable player on the back end. When they play single high, more often than not, he will be the post player. So a guy that's going to be playing as the center field guy deep down the middle. Keep an eye out for Xavier Woods in this matchup. All right. Huge game this week. Cannot wait to break it down next week here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Again, the best way to support the show, if you liked what you heard today here on the program, just go, if you're not already, make sure you go subscribe wherever podcasts can be found. And if you can, give us a little support. Just go, leave us a rating, leave us a comment wherever podcasts can be found. All right, we will see you next week here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We'll talk to you next week.